Good day to everybody who's joined us on this webinar. I'd like to welcome you to Grid Dynamics. Today, we're hosting an exciting discussion on empowering the future of customer experience with next best action and AI. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is June Bauer, and I'm going to be your host with an amazing panel that we have here today. And we're going to be discussing this topic, but we'd like to include you in the discussion. So if you have questions that you'd like to ask our panelists as we go along, please just add them to the Q&A. There's a button down at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you click on that and write your question in, we'll be noting those. And then at the end of our webinar, we'll take those questions and answer as many of them as we can. So please participate with us. And let's get started. So why don't we go to the first slide here? Here's our agenda for today, and it's pretty simple. We're going to, first, I'd like to introduce you to our incredible panelists. Then we're going to have a discussion around this topic, and we've got some really interesting questions. Again, welcome any questions you may have, and we'll follow up at the end with a Q&A. It's as simple as that. So let's go to the next slide. I would like to introduce this amazing panel that we have here today. And I'm going to let each of the panelists introduce themselves. So let's get started. Debasmita, would you please introduce yourself to the group here?
Hi, June. Hi, everyone. I'm Debasmita, and I'm pretty excited to be here as one of the panelists. I work with MasterCard as manager in their AI Garage team, and we work on developing AI-based solution and products for the customers, both like internal and external, and I'm really excited about the talk today.
Great. Thank you so much and welcome. Dalali, how about you?
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
And my name is Dalali Agbenyaga. And currently, I'm the Director of Data Science and Analytics for Cardes. And so for those who don't know about Cardes, we are the #1 baby clothes company in the United States. So we make clothes for kids, from sizes 0, which is newborn baby, all the way to twin size, which is, teenager size, or sizes for like very, very older kids. Right. So I've been there for the past year or two since the pandemic, and have been leading the data science team there that's engaged in doing all the analytics and modeling that empowers our marketing teams for customer marketing, loyalty, as well as personalization.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. And I think anyone who's had a baby definitely knows Carter's all over the place and a great brand. So thanks for joining today. Bardia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep, absolutely. Hi, my name is Bardia. I'm a head of data science from the demand perspective at Mars. I've been with Mars for about 3 years now, and the area that we generally manage is pricing, promotion, and anything to do with marketing. So that's what we consider demand, and happy to be here.
And we are happy to have you. Thank you for joining. Let me turn to Ilya now. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining this session. My name is Ilya Katsov. I'm Vice President of Technology at Grid Dynamics, and I'm predominantly responsible for projects related to data engineering, data analytics, for improving marketing operations, supply chain, and other use cases in the price area.
Great. Nice to have you here joining us, Ilya. And I am June Bauer. I have a long history of working in the Silicon Valley in technology, having started at Apple in 1981, working with Steve Jobs on the Apple II, then the Apple III, and then helping launch the Macintosh. So got my start there and went on to work for many Silicon Valley-based companies, such as Adobe, where I was the vice president of brand, and Cisco, where I ran corporate communications. Also was the CMO of WebEx and many other marketing jobs. And today I just work with companies like Grid Dynamics, helping with really exciting projects with amazing panelists and amazing audiences like you. So speaking of our audience today, We are so happy you took the time to join. And to do the very best job that we can for you, I have a couple questions for you to learn about you so that our panelists and myself can direct our conversation to what you're interested in. So can we bring up the first poll? I'm going to ask you to take a poll. And please, if you wouldn't mind participating, we want to know why you joined the webinar, and you can choose as many of these as makes sense. So, if you came for all these reasons, you can check them all. If you came for a couple, just let us know, and then we'll be able to really formulate our answers best for you. So go ahead and fill this in. You should see little polls with little bar charts at the bottom that you can click, or it should come up on your screen. Okay, can everyone hopefully see this? So we're seeing people weigh in. A lot of people want to learn more about AI and next best action. That's good. I want to keep up on trending technologies. Another good score, high number. This is a trending technology. It's a really interesting one. And our panelists are pioneers really in running next best action and in AI and analytics. So great group to learn from and hearing from our panelists. These are really wonderful. This is super helpful. So it looks like fewer of you actually have to do this, which is good. This is to give you some time to learn, but really appreciate the responses. Very helpful. Okay, let's go to I have one more poll for you before we get started. If you wouldn't mind indulging us, just so we can learn a little more about you. So this next poll is, I think the most challenging thing about implementing next best action is, and here we want you to choose one, just choose one. So ensuring my teammates are supportive and aligned on the work, learning how to construct a next best action model, making sure the model is accurate, and integrating the results into the business. And if you haven't done it yet, just guess at what you think in your company would be the hardest part of it. Great. Thanks for indulging us and taking these polls. And Alex, if you wouldn't mind showing us the results, that would be great. Okay. Well, this is interesting. The results here, I have to tell you, you all surprised me because I was expecting most people to say learning how to construct a next best action model, or maybe making sure the model is accurate. Both, there's been a lot of things written about these, but it looks like the one that's winning out, and it's probably statistically significant, is integrating the results into the business, which is something our panelists are going to address today. So I think that's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because sometimes technology seems like the challenge, but many times I think, making sure that it becomes a part of how your organization works and having your work accepted can be really challenging. So that's very helpful. Thanks everybody for letting us know where you're at. And let's start our panel discussion. So Alex, if you could take us out of the presentation, that would be great. So everybody can just see people's bright and beautiful faces up close. And let me get started with the first question, which is, what exactly is next best action? What is that as a model, and why is it important? So Delali, maybe you can kick us off here with an answer to that one.
Absolutely. So in simple terms, next best action model is really a customer-centric or a customer-driven approach to marketing, where you consider all the possible actions that a customer can take, and then suggest the action that has the highest chance of making the customer convert, which is conversion or the success of metrics in this case. And it is really based on customer data. Okay, so it's based on customer behavior, customer transaction, customer preferences. And the other thing that is real time and automated, meaning that it requires very less manual effort and intervention. And also for the most part, it involves machine learning or artificial intelligence. So bringing customer data, business goals, machine learning, and artificial intelligence together to recommend an action to a customer in real time that will increase the chance of the customer converting or making a purchase or signing up for a service. So that would be in simple terms how I will define next best action model.
That was actually wonderful. Thank you. It was very easy to understand. And I think the interesting thing about next best action is it's really helpful to you in your company because it helps increase conversions. But as a marketer, I also think that it's helpful to the customer because it creates the best journey for them. And it's a specific and personal journey. So, it's going to increase how they feel about the brand as well in a positive way. So I love that. I think that's great. Ilya, what's your take on next best action? Do you see it the same way as Delali, or are any differences?
Yeah, pretty much similarly, but I would highlight a few differences as well. So in my experience, basically, next best action projects are mainly around, they have like two distinct features. One is focus on prescriptive models as opposed to using just predictive analytics or scores, which is a traditional approach in most, marketing solutions. And the second one is strategic optimization of sequences of actions as opposed to optimizing some immediate outcomes like click-through rates or conversion rates. In next best action, in many cases, the driver for developing of these solutions is the necessity to optimize long-term customer engagement over several months or even several years. And you need to build models that do it strategically rather than just, predicting the probability of conversion or something like that. This is one perspective. And I would say another important perspective is that, in my experience is that there are like two ways of how it can be integrated in the business environment, integrated with other systems. In many cases, in many projects that I participated in, next best action was implemented basically as a decision support tool. And typically the reason why it was implemented is that traditionally in marketing teams, they have many prescriptive and predictive types of models that produce different scores. And marketing teams, they struggle to reconcile the scores together and make the final decision what actually needs to be done with regard to a specific customer. And next best action is basically an attempt to remediate it by building prescriptive models that recommend a specific action rather than producing scores to the marketing teams. It's more like a decision support tool. But also there are, and we did it, for example, like for telecom companies that need to do this type of analysis to fight with customer churn. But another group of projects in this area, I would say it's focused more on building completely automated personalization engines that are directly integrated with websites or other digital touch points, and they make and execute these decisions pretty much in automated way. And it is also what many companies, I would say, call next best action type of solutions.
Okay, that was actually super helpful. Thank you, Ilya, for that in-depth description. Very complimentary. So let me move on and ask this question. So, how do you currently use data analytics and machine learning to improve your customer experience? And what role does prescriptive analytics play here? So, Bardia, we haven't heard from you. What's your take on this?
So there are a lot of areas that Mars right now is using next best action or AI in general for supply chain, R&D, and demand. But let me give you a specific example from demand perspective. So for promo optimization, to see what is the optimized promo that we should, and what we call customers in our case is Walmart, Amazon, the retailer. What you guys define as customers is consumers to us. So from the customer perspective, if you have a promo calendar for the next year, and we want to build models that tells you what is the optimized promo, how long you should be running it at, and we can do this at the SKU level. That's the kind of level we can get into, and not only tells you what is the ROI or what is the return that you're going to get from this promo. We can also figure out what is the return or ROI the customer is going to get. So the optimized calendar that we built, we make sure, not only it's profitable for us, it's also profitable for our customers at the same time. And it's very actionable. So, you actually get a calendar, obviously it can be modified, but it's fully automated, which makes a big difference versus, a lot of time when they used to build these models, they looked back historically as you want to call it descriptive and figure out what was the ROI for this promotion that I ran. Rather than doing that, let's see what is the ROI is if we run this promotion next year, which makes it a lot more actionable and easier for people to digest.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think making data and analytics actionable is really going to take the ability for marketers to be successful into the future. It's such a huge change, and it's a great opportunity. So I love that description. Great example. Debasmita, what is your take on this?
So I would give somewhat a little bit different example, because for companies in the payment industry, the customers are not always like B2C kind of customers. We mostly customers for companies in the payment industries are mostly like issuers or acquirers or the merchants which get onboarded to our system. Like one of the very relevant examples that I can share where we use data analytics and machine learning to improve the customer experience, and it's also a very prominent problem which is there, is to improve the decline rate. Whenever someone is using the card to make a transaction, false declines are directly related to suboptimal customer experience, amounting to both revenue and reputation loss for all the entities across the payment value chain. Now, identifying the fraudulent cards poses an inherent challenge now for various reasons. Like there is a compromise when we go through the fraud detection. Now, fraud detection slows the authentication process, but the customer demands faster response. Now, the present system many times tends to produce numerous false positives, which with being vulnerable to ingenious fraudster, which in conjunction, so what happens, it can lead to a lot of dollar loss as well as reputation loss for the issuer. So one of the projects which we also worked on, or like many people in this industry works on, is make use of machine learning and AI-based algorithm to make sure what are the recommendations that we can give to the issuer and acquirers, and also the merchant, maybe what are the products they can use, or what are the changes that they can do in their present decision-making system, so then they do not go ahead and make so many false declines. And in the same time, they do not go ahead and approve fraudulent transaction. That's a major balance that we have to make sure. And there we know that AI and machine learning plays a very important role.
That is a really interesting example. I have to say, as a consumer, I've been in that position of getting my credit card, turned down, and it was false, right? And it's always so embarrassing as a consumer to have that happen, and to have you guys doing that and be solving that problem using analytics is really amazing. So personally, thank you for doing that. I love it. So let's see. I think Delali, you had something you wanted to share on that topic as well.
Going back to the question of how analytics and machine learning is applied, especially in prescriptive. Just so to give the clarification for our listeners, prescriptive is really doing the optimization. This is saying that what can we do to optimize the outcome, right? Versus predictive analytics, that is just trying to predict what will happen, right? So you can think of prescriptive analytics as the last point of machine learning, where you are actually determining what is the best outcome, to give. And I just want to kind of bring that clarification for our listeners to get the difference between descriptive analytics, which is when you're actually just reporting, versus diagnostics, where you go and understand why is this happening. And then predictive is you go a step further and say, what will happen next? And then prescriptive, which is the ultimate one, is to really try to determine the best outcome, right? So at Cardes, as you can imagine, we have millions and millions of customers, and these are people that have kids and they are buying clothes. So you can imagine that it's our job to make sure that we are actually predicting and optimizing the type of communication we give them. So you can imagine parents don't have a lot of time, babysitting and trying to go buy product for kids. So what we do at Cardes, with machine learning and predictive analytics is to make sure that we look at each customer's purchase behavior and time of their purchase and predict when it's time for them to buy a baby product or a toddler product or even, a diaper bag or, the nurse best thing that they need to buy as parents, right? So for some of them that are in our loyalty program, we have a lot of information on when their kids will turn 1 year, when they will be 2 years, and when they will start party training. And we are using that data and analytics to recommend to them what are the best products for bath, what are the best products for playground visitations and things like that. So all of that communication is driven by the data we collected on the customers and applying some advanced analytics on that to create the best communications for these customers.
Okay, that's great. And thank you for that really clear description. That was super helpful. So let's now go from some very interesting examples to some challenges. What are your main challenges in relation to customer data analytics and data-driven personalization? And what have you done to address these challenges? So let's start. Ilya, maybe you can comment on that.
So I kind of touched this topic already in the beginning that there are typically the necessity to develop next best action. It comes from limitations of traditional analytic solutions, and the challenges are typically I would say there are like 5 or 4 main challenges in this area. One is that typically traditional solutions, they produce different predictive scores, and it's difficult to reconcile them. And if you have scores like customer lifetime value, propensity to brand, propensity to channel, then in many cases it's difficult to take actual action based on that, determine what should be the optimal promotion or optimal communication cadence, and what will be the ROI of these different actions, and so on. And this is very, very typical, I would say, challenge in marketing analytics. The second is basically myopic nature of traditional marketing models. That in these models we typically look at only immediate outcomes like click-through rates or conversion rates, and we do not really assess long-term impact of specific actions or specific recommendations, and so on. And this is also a huge challenge in many cases, in many projects. Then the third item that I would call out is in many cases, in many like marketing analytics solutions, only behavioral data is incorporated or profile data is incorporated, like clickstream information, demographic information. But more complex, non-structured data like call transcripts, customer reviews, and so on, they are not properly processed, but actually, in many cases, it's very important to incorporate it. For example, let's say in the case of telecom companies, there are a lot of information in call transcripts that are collected from customer support centers, and we can analyze in these call transcripts extracting signals about sentiment. We can get useful insights into what drives customer behavior. Is it quality of service? Is it cost? Is it something else? This topic of like analyzing customer behavior and understanding customer behavior drivers is actually yet another challenge that is also, I would say, very, very common in traditional analytics, because traditional analytics models, they tend to be like black boxes. Not necessarily. You can use some techniques for feature importance analysis, of course, and everything, but in many cases, we find it important to specifically like build specific sets of models or specific sets of tools to analyze like sequences of customer events and get better insights into what drives customer behavior, what are the typical precursors of conversions or churn or other events of interest. And again, I think this is a very common pain point in the industry.
That was a great list. Thanks, Ilya. Really helpful and pragmatic, I think. So, Debasmita, what have been your main challenges in relation to customer data analytics and data-driven personalization?
Yep. Like some of the challenges that we face with dealing with customer data is number one is the scaling of data that we know that at present it's the amount of data that we need to work on is it's huge, and it's not only developing in-house POC kind of thing which we can just run on our system, but we have to make sure that it gets very well deployed in the customer system. So sometimes it's always not possible to go ahead and deploy something very, very complex. It's not like we do not have the capability of deploying something very complex, but we also have to make sure that what is the technology or what is the infrastructure which is available with the customers. So sometimes it's also possible that a very simple model which can be scaled up very easily can be useful to give a very good lift in the solution that the customer is wanting. So in that point of time, it is not very feasible to force upon a very complex model, that one. And also data, as I was telling, since data is at present, now the data is always not very clean. Most of the time when we start working with the data that the client gives to us, or sometimes which is comes from external source, and even sometimes the data that companies have in their own database, it's not always clean. So most of the time, whenever like data scientists start working on any project, majority of the beginning few weeks is spent on cleaning and managing the data rather than training it. Like data pre-processing is a very, very important and very time-consuming part of building a model. I would say personally that the model building is more or less easier part, but the making sure data is correct, you're creating the best features is one of the very, very important thing that even the data scientists now who want to get into this field should focus on. And I think for companies, they do have to invest in and make sure they have a very good governance system in place, like a very good, strong governance system and data cataloging, so that they do know that the data that they're sharing is very transparent and they do not have a problem while the data is getting transferred. So that's one of the major thing I think people should take care of, and we also like take care of. And apart from that, one of the challenges that I also think that we face is that thing is testing. So it may happen that we have a very good result when we are training on the training data set that we have, but when it goes into production, we have to make sure that we do have a testing set separate from the training one, because maybe the real time it would be like out of time. We are training on the past 12 months and maybe something suddenly have changed and it might fail while it's in production, or it might fail when it runs on real time. So that is also a very, very important check that anyone should do while they are trying to deploy something in the customer environment, or like in like real time production kind of models. So it's properly tested using a completely blind data set, completely out of time data set, so that the model is not really like it doesn't really overfit on a particular time frame data. It actually understands the pattern, and it does well in other times too, and it doesn't really fail in while it runs in the real time.
Yeah, I mean, you're really bringing to life how when push comes to shove and you actually have to implement, things may not go exactly as planned. So very helpful. Let's move now to the very pragmatic, which is how do you what's the recipe? How do you really build one of these things? And the question I have is, what are the stages or the steps that you need to take to implement a successful next best action model? So, Bardia, how about if we start with you on this one?
Yeah, number one, and I think that your poll also showed that it's not the kind of model, or it's not even sometimes data. These are really important. It's important to start with business and what questions they have as your starting point. So someone from the business needs to be involved. Hopefully you have upper management support also, but someone who's going to be the product owner and who use this analysis or this model to actually take the action would be the first step. So I would never run a project and then show it to them. They need to be involved since day one. The other thing is you have to make sure you break it down to a smaller problem, because if you say I want to solve my demand problem, my supply chain problem, my marketing problem, that's such a big problem that you need multiple years of gathering data, multiple years of model building, and by the time you actually push anything out, you're not even sure it's relevant or not anymore. So we try to keep it under 12 weeks or so every iteration that we have. And the other part is from the data science perspective and the feature selection perspective, once you got the data and make sure you have good quality data, you need to be honest with your, customer, your stakeholders. What I really hate is when you go to some of these meetings and every model that you built is 99% accurate. What they don't tell you is, is that validation? Is what size is the model that I have? What kind of model that I have? So, being honest and providing some detail in terms of what's going on, where is this statistically significant when it's not? I feel like that's how you set up the project to be successful.
That was great. Thank you. Thank you for that. And really good, clear steps to take. I'd love to hear from Delali on that as well. I mean, is your recipe similar, or are you baking some different kind of bread?
Yeah, I think Badia has touched on one of the areas, which is in dealing with the business side. I would like to also highlight some structural steps. So the first one is to make sure that your data is not only good but also connected, right? Because many times you have data in different systems. One in the marketing manager's inbox, the other one in a database. Some of the data is in some vendor platform, right? So I think that the first step of making sure you can have a successful next best action model is to make sure that your data is fully connected all the way to the implementation stage. When the customer responds to your model action, you can also get the feedback data back to your system so that you can do what we call reinforcement learning, so that the system can learn from its mistakes and the system can, basically correct itself, right? So my number one point is that make sure that your infrastructure is good and your data is connected from data collection all the way to results implementation. That's number one. Number two is do not think you can jump all the way to next best action from the go, right? You have to pass through certain steps. So I think you have to start with typical campaign management, where you basically can operate all your offers that you are giving to your customers, right? So in my case, some of the experiences some of the ways that I have successfully implemented this is making sure that we have a good campaign management system where we can at least manage the campaign. Once you can manage, you can then think of optimization, right? So based on how customers are responding, you are really optimizing the campaign and you are actually gathering all those campaign optimization data. Then now you are ready to build the sophisticated next best action model. Now, during this model building, you've got to make sure that you have people around the table that understand the business and how the model is going to work on the customers. Many times the mistake that we technical people make will be we go and sit by our desk, write crazy codes, get very predictive models, and ask business to implement without thinking about, they have to get content ready. For example, if you are doing next best action, there has to be a content that goes with whatever scores that you give. There has to be an offer that goes with it. There has to be a measurement of how the offer performs. So making sure that you have the business person around the table taking you through all the stages of the business process is also very important to ensure that you will be successful. And then finally, the results measurement. Once you go through all the process, ensure that you are measuring the result and putting that result output back into the model and optimizing the model. And quite frankly, this is why we say it's an automated process, or you want it to be an automated process, because there is just a lot of data points coming from different sources. And for you to make it next best action, really, you have to understand all the various components of it and then to make it very, very successful. So that would be my addition to what the other panelists have said.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, we get so excited about the technology and the beauty of building an amazing analytical model, but it kind of ties to what I was thinking about in my next question. And it's one that the panelists, I think we saw that our audience really cared about, and that's adoption. So I think what you said, Delali, ties completely into adoption has to start with teamwork for all your cross-functional teams needing to be involved in the process. So I love that point. Let me turn to one more question I have, which is this one about, how do we integrate the results? And then I want to ask you panelists to answer some questions that our audience has been asking. And audience, thank you for being so involved and asking so many questions. I'd like to just encourage you, if you have any more questions, please put them into the Q&A, because we're going to start answering those next. And I would love to get your questions in there now. But before we do that, one more question for me, for our panelists. So how do you integrate the results of next best action so that the business adopts it? It's one thing to build a model. It's another thing to get people to use it and to actually change their business processes and change the way they work. So Ilya, can I kick it off with you?
I would say if we are building some sort of a decision support tool, then typically what the typical output that they produce for the marketing teams is basically the number of scores conditioned on specific actions for individual customers. Basically, what will happen with the customer provided that we take this type of action, this type of offer, and so on. And then marketing teams can aggregate these scores, these numbers in different ways and form the percentiles of customers that they can actually target. And this is very simple concept that marketing teams typically understand very well, and it's easy to explain to them. And in my experience, if we start a project with discussing with marketing teams what kind of business problem they currently have and how we can produce this prescriptive output that can be easily aggregated, let's say, in percentiles of customers, and then these percentiles can be loaded into marketing automation systems. Then it's very transparent to them, and very clear understanding from their side that it will help them to improve their operations, because they can execute this prescriptive output pretty much directly instead of making some heuristic decisions on their own. But the second alternative is to build more a complete personalization engine that can basically learn on the feedback, more like a reinforcement learning approach. And in that case, we had cases that we used to build these engines that operate in pretty much automated mode, and actually business teams, they involved, of course, as stakeholders, but they are not involved into this process as operational people, because the process is basically automated. The system learns from the feedback it gets from digital touch points, optimizes the policy, and then this policy is redeployed in production, and new actions are executed, new feedback is collected, and the whole loop is executed in pretty much automated way. And this is, of course, this is beneficial approach in the cases where you can actually do that, meaning digital touch points, recommender systems, and so on, as opposed to traditional marketing communications, for example.
Okay, that was great. Thank you very much for that. And Barty, I know you have some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, so again, I think, as I was saying before, I don't think models, none of the projects fail because the model quality is necessarily really good or bad. It's, as I mentioned, business needs to be involved since day one. And also, when you get them involved, depending on the type of business, if you're a tech company or a CPG company, you're coming as someone with data knowledge and analytics knowledge, but, some of them have been doing this for 15, 20 years. So some have humility to listen to what they say, because they've probably seen a lot of different versions of this. And, make some people are also uncomfortable that they feel like their job is getting replaced, which is, most of the time that's not the case. It's just supposed to make their work more efficient. So once you get them involved since day one, in terms of what you give them, people hate getting an email and then getting the file and copying it somewhere and then run a process to get the answer. So make the process as automated as possible, and also integrate that with their system. So, if they're doing demand planning, ideally these numbers should be fed into that system and they can just modify it and then submit it for approval. So these are some of the, make it as seamless as part of the process as possible. And also, be really open to what they have to say, because I've seen this a lot. We come in with the idea that we know the best, even though some of the data scientists are right out of college, but just because they build a model, they think they have all the answers.
Yeah, that is true. And I have to say, as a marketer, there's nothing more beautiful than an IT person who really wants to team up with you from the beginning and work with you together. And I'm telling you, because so many of us in marketing these days are so analytical and data oriented, it is not only a beautiful thing, it is so much fun to work together to solve a problem. So I think starting that way, most marketers are very data driven, very analytical. They really look on their IT team as this essential group of people who not only brings the skills and capabilities, but brings tremendous ideas. And so I love the teamwork idea. I think it's fantastic. Debasmita, can you add anything to that discussion we've been having?
Yeah, I want to add something different over here. So one of the not really just I can say challenges in adopting the systems, basically the models. The thing is, we are able to run the models, and let's say we come up with a recommendation okay, these are the new strategies that the customer needs to implement. Now, when the account managers or the business people who are responsible in taking these results to the customer, one of the feedback that we always get is, how do we present it to the customer? The problem is we cannot just take we have run a model and this is what the model is telling. They really won't be interested. Then it is very difficult for a business person suddenly to say that, okay, you have a model and this is the model is giving the result, but how is it impacting our business? How do we understand that the model is giving a correct result? It's always not, we cannot just say that, okay, these are the recommendations which is coming from the model. It needs to be presented properly, maybe a proper dashboard that the customer can play on and say, okay, what if we don't select this option? What if we select option number 5? You just gave me 2 options. What if we have the option of playing around with the dashboard on our own? Whenever the account managers go and have a talk with the customer, they also have asked for can we have this kind of customer where we can change things so that we can change things on spot when you are having the discussion and see how the results are changing. Maybe you're recommending one thing, but can we just change the recommendation in the dashboard and see how the numbers are changing? So that's always something as an end product. When we present results with the customer, we also have to make sure that it is presented in a very proper way, so the customer also feels involved in their decision making. It's not something like you're just taking a service from a company, you're also involved in the decision making. So you also know that the services or the recommendations you're taking is actually value. So it also helps us because whenever they are selecting any decision, that we also know that our model is working, because we do need a feedback. It's not always just giving them a model result. We also have to make sure that whenever they're using a recommendation we are providing is actually making sense or not. And that is in terms of recommendation. Whenever we are companies send let's say we're working on fraud model kind of things, and we can go to any customer and say, these are the scores, it will be very useful to you. But also one of the very relevant questions that may come up, what if there is some sudden changes in the market? For example, when we have this COVID, suddenly everything changed. I think many companies are facing the same thing. There is a big change in the distribution in data. There is suddenly customer preferences are changing, customer behavior is changing, spending patterns are changing. So in that case, how are you making sure that the model that you are giving us is correct? because it may happen that you're training your model on pre-COVID data and your results are very, very messed up when we are seeing it now. So that is also a good kind of analysis we have to show them so that they're confident enough to integrate our scores and our recommendation to their system.
Okay, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Devasmita, for that. I want to turn to the questions that you, our audience, have been asking, and there's some really good ones. And one that was repeated a number of times is, do you have any recommendations on ways we can learn more about next best action, books to read, articles to read? I know personally, I read some great blogs on the Grid Dynamics website in learning more about next best action. And we'll definitely send you those links. But I'd like to encourage our panelists, if there's anything that you like, any resources that you like, if you want to just type that into the chat to the audience, that would be great. And if you don't have them at hand now and you can't do it, if you can send them to us, we'd love to send those to you after this webinar. So if you want to go ahead and send us anything you like. Also, somebody mentioned Ilya's book. Ilya, you want to just mention the name of your book and where people can get that?
Actually, we published a book on algorithmic methods in marketing like 3 or 4 years ago. So this book is available. You can just Google algorithmic marketing and you can download it. And I also would like to comment on the first question regarding like the frameworks or particular ways of implementing, learning more about next best action. My recommendation actually is to take a look at Facebook's Reagent Framework, which is a reinforcement learning framework for essentially marketing applications. It basically, we tried it in a few projects and we found that it's pretty, I would say, impressive and very powerful because it's able, you can connect it to production systems and start to get essentially application logs and learn from them and then produce policies that can be deployed directly in production. And it dramatically reduces the amount of effort that is needed to implement this type of systems.
Great. Thanks for adding that. That's wonderful. So I know our time is running short, but there's a question in here that I think would be a great one from our audience to ask our panelists. And the question is, a key challenge for next best action is to learn what life event changes a customer's going through. For instance, they just became pregnant or are planning to buy a house. How are you addressing this challenge in your organizations? And I do have to just add, I think some of you probably are familiar with the Target story, the Target retail store, where they did such a great job with their analytics that they started being able to tell by what people purchased if the woman was pregnant, and then they started marketing things for having a baby before she had the baby, and there was a huge backlash to that because women felt like it was creepy and that somehow this company was looking in on their lives, which kind of in a weird way they were doing, but using analytics. And there was a huge backlash and Target had to stop doing that based on the fact that they, in a weird way, knew too much or knew things too soon. So let me just ask our panelists to comment on that. And Delali, I see you smiling, so maybe you want to kick it off and add something to that?
Yeah, absolutely. The Target story was an interesting one. So just to answer the question, I think that analytics is as good as the data available to analyze, right? So Target was able to analyze that because of the big variety of products that they sell, and they've been able to determine that. I used to work for a company that also sell, one of our clients actually sell engagement rings. So when people come to buy engagement rings, we know that, okay, in the next 6 months to 1 year, they might get married. And we started marketing, marriage or wedding related products to them, and actually work well, right? So what I will say here is, number one, there is a lot of data privacy issues going on, right? And ethics of machine learning discussion going on. My first recommendation will be to make sure that every information that you are collecting from the customer knows how you are going to use that. I know most banks and most institutions already doing that. Whenever they collect the information for you or from you, they will tell you how they will use that information, right? That's number one. And number two is to make sure that your machine learning algorithm or your AI is not biased towards certain groups. So, for example, we've seen predictions that was biased towards women or that was biased towards African American population and things like that. So there's supposed to be a good balance between predicting a customer's life stage and actually marketing to them. So the simple answer to the question is that as long as you have data that can predict customers' life stage, go ahead and predict that. But make sure that from a compliance perspective, you get clarification from the customer on how to use the data. Number two is that most companies will not be able to really predict customers' life stage correctly, except they have certain specific type of data, right? So when are you getting married, when you have kids? I work for a company that sell baby clothes. So there are some information that we have. So when we are doing like sweeps, for example, we are able to invite people to join our sweepstakes to say, when were you pregnant? When will be your due date, right? In those situations, we already collected the information from the customers and they know and willingly share with us. So it's okay to action on that and say, hey, welcome your new baby with this new product, right? So we do things like that. But that's because the customer has willingly given us that data. If you are not working in an institution where you are able to do that and have not gotten the go ahead from the customer to do that, I think that there is not a lot of benefits in doing that compared to the disadvantages that can bring to your organization when you are faced with the privacy situation. But at the end of the day, that is why next best action is good, because what next best action is doing is that it's trying to look at your most recent behavior, your transactions and your preference, and based on that, putting all the data together, applying machine learning algorithm on that, and then saying that this is the best thing to give you at this time, right? So I think that you can also solve this situation by having a good next best action model. So you
That's
can
great.
actually give the best thing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
great.
that's what I will add. Yeah.
I love it. I love how you came back to next best action. So unfortunately, we're running out of time here. But before you all leave, I have one more thing that I need your help on, which is a final poll. So if you wouldn't mind participating with me in this last poll, that would be fantastic. So I just want to know, after all this incredible information that came at us from our amazing panelists, where you're at. So when I leave today, I'm going to, and now you can choose all of these, one, none, whatever you think, but we'd love to know. So think about how to apply what I learned today. Send a LinkedIn invite to the panelists. Start planning my next best action model. Get a snack and get back to work. So choose all or none or some of these, and let's see what the results are. Okay, Alex, you want to bring up where we're at? All right, think about how to apply what I learned. I love that. You are a very proactive group of people. That's wonderful. And I like that some of you are going to get a snack as well. Great feedback. I'm happy that you have learned things, that you do believe you can apply them. Let's go to the next slide. I think that if you all enjoyed this panel today, and I thought we had just great panelists and I learned a lot myself, you may enjoy coming to the next Grid Dynamic event, which is Dynamic Talks. It's a digital summit, and it's going to have very helpful information both about the business of transformation, but also the technology involved in it. And that's coming up September 15th. We'll send you some information on it when we send you the recording, and you'll all get the recording. I want to thank, first of all, our audience today. You were a great audience. You were so interactive. I loved your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. We will try to answer them offline for those of you that had specific questions we didn't get to. Thank you to our panelists. You were fabulous and just shared with us so much great information and so many wonderful stories and examples. So really appreciate that and your participation. And we are so grateful for everybody joining and really hope to see you for our summit on the 15th. Thanks so much. Have a good rest of the day, and we'll see you back here soon. Bye.